Well, welcome once again to Pennsylvania. Here we are along the banks of the Ridley Creek. Got a little story to tell you today. So obviously you have read the title of this video. We're going to be talking about the Witch of Ridley Creek. And this is a witch trial that took place back in 1683. And the trial itself was actually overseen by William Penn, the founder of Pennsylvania, William Penn. So it's kind of interesting. A lot of times you hear about the witch trials, you hear about the Salem witch trials or things going on over in England, but Pennsylvania has its own witch trial as well. So we're going to talk about that in this video. She probably wasn't actually a witch, but that's the way these things go. So the name of the unfortunate victim in her story, her name was Margaret Mattsson. And she was of Swedish and Finnish descent. Probably came here to Pennsylvania in the 1640s, when Pennsylvania was actually a colony of Sweden. A lot of people don't realize that, but Sweden colonized Pennsylvania first, and in the 1640s. And an area around Philadelphia was called New Sweden. They probably arrived then, but they moved to the area of Ridley Creek in about 1654, because that's when the Dutch kicked the Swedish out and the Dutch took over that colony. So they probably moved to this area around that date. Now I have to admit, I'm not probably in the exact area where they lived. A little bit north of there, I'm actually in Ridley Creek State Park. But the area where they lived is all built up now. It's down near a place called Eddystone. But this makes a much more picturesque place to film. This is probably what it looked like back when her and her husband lived along the Ridley Creek. It would have been all woodlands and like this, still wilds back in the 1650s. So that's why we're up in this section of Ridley Creek instead of farther down where the story actually did occur. So I think I'll just walk along the creek a little bit as I talk to you. It is a beautiful spot out here though. Of course, this is mid-October. Get about that time to tell ghost stories. I'm not sure when this video will be uploaded either. It might be past Halloween. But anyway, they lived here for quite some time, and then in 1683, the English took over Pennsylvania as a colony. And that's when the accusations started against Margaret. Her neighbors were complaining about her, saying that she was bewitching their cattle, killing livestock, causing their cattle to not give milk anymore, or their cows. And they were claiming that she was even appearing in spectral form, in a ghostly form, to people. And so they accused her of witchcraft. And just like many other witch trials, including the Salem witch trials and the ones that are going over in England and on the continent, as they say, it was an easy way to accuse someone of a crime, especially someone you didn't like, a neighbor that you were having a quarrel with. If you accused them of witchcraft, it's kind of a way of getting rid of them. And I think that's kind of what happened with Margaret here. I know I told a more recent witch story of a town closer to where I live, Ringtown in Schuylkill County, and that occurred in the 1930s. That was a similar case. Some neighbors accused kind of a grumpy old woman of witchcraft. That's probably what happened to Margaret as well, because by the time 1683 comes along, she's probably pretty old. Maybe she was starting to look like a witch too. Anyway, this law was, there was a law against witchcraft enacted by James I of England back in 1604, and there was a witchcraft craziness going on over in England as well. A lot of innocent people were accused and even killed during that time. But anyway, come back to Pennsylvania and to Margaret. Like I said, her neighbors were accusing her of some pretty awful and some ghostly things. And another thing that didn't help poor Margaret is that she was known for using traditional Finnish, because remember she had Finnish and Swedish descent, traditional Finnish healing medicine, using herbs and stuff, and which actually probably worked. But when you have a woman that goes out in the woods and collects herbs and heals people, you kind of get a reputation. Even though it's a good thing, back then it kind of gave people the spooks, I guess you could say. And it was another reason to convince her. But anyway, they accused her, and a grand jury was set up, and that grand jury was overseen by William Penn himself. And they decided there was enough evidence for her to go to trial. And that's what happened. She did go to trial. And actually William Penn oversaw the trial himself and did all the questioning Because you understand, we were a colony of England at the time. There was no United States in 1683, almost 100 years before this land became a country. So things were a little bit different law-wise at times. So William Penn himself did the questioning for that trial. It's kind of interesting. So you may have been hearing some other voices in this video. They're not voices of the Witch of Ridley Creek. I just passed a noisy Boy Scout group, but they're out here enjoying themselves. We're still walking along the Ridley Creek here. If you're familiar with the park here, this is the Orange Trail in Ridley Creek State Park. So yeah, they decided there was enough evidence for her to go to trial, even though there was no direct evidence of witchcraft against her. I mean, all the evidence was hearsay, you know, as well. You know, she said, he said, no direct evidence. I kind of feel like for William Penn, it was kind of a novelty, you know, to have a witch trial. Kind of feel like maybe that's why he decided to go ahead and have it. Of course, these are superstitious times as well. Just walking down to another beautiful view of the creek down here. It's been really dry lately, but it's good to see some nice water flow here yet. And of course, back then, if you were accused of witchcraft, that usually meant a hanging. So it was serious business back then. If you were accused of it, if you were found guilty, that was it. But in the end, it's kind of interesting. William Penn did find Margaret guilty, but not guilty on all charges. She was considered guilty of having the reputation of being witch, but she wasn't charged with actually being a witch. It's kind of interesting. So she was charged with the reputation of being a witch. So you get back then, I guess you could be guilty based on having a reputation for something, but she was not accused of actually practicing witchcraft, I guess you could say. Which was good for her. I mean, they didn't hang her then. She was released into the custody of her husband. I think they had to pay a fine of like 50 pounds or something on a condition of good behavior too, or something like that. So she was let off in the end. But anyway, I'm sure it would still be a stressful time if you were accused of being a witch, whether or not you were acquitted or not. Because for the rest of the time then you have a reputation, because you were actually charged as being guilty of having a reputation. Anyway, kind of an interesting story. Pennsylvania's own witch trial. So yeah, an interesting little story. Like I said, when you think about witch trials, you don't really think about Pennsylvania. Think about other places. But if you want to learn more about this, obviously you can read about it online. I may have left out a detail or two accidentally. Anyway, thanks for coming along on a nice little spooky story. Even though she probably wasn't actually a witch, still makes for a nice little story. Anyway, thanks for coming along, and I'll see you some other videos. Spending a day out here filming, kind of in the Philly area. All right, I'll see you around.